Have you ever wondered if it's possible to use yoga to improve bone health? Well, it is. And in this video, we are going to talk about some of the scientific research that's been done showing how yoga can be used to improve bone health. I'm Sarah. I'm a 500-hour trained yoga teacher, and I also have training that's specific to yoga and osteoporosis, as well as being a BoneFit certified instructor. I'm also a certified nutritional health coach, and I am all about improving bone health. I'm so excited that you've come to join me on this journey to better bone health. Let's get started talking about Dr. Fishman's research and the 12 poses that have been scientifically proven to improve bone health. In this video, I'm going to talk about and demonstrate and show how to adapt the standing poses that are part of Dr. Fishman's research, showing poses that you can do that have been scientifically proven to improve bone health. So Dr. Fishman is a medical doctor. He teaches at Columbia Medical School, and he is also a trained yoga teacher. And he has spent decades researching how yoga can be used to improve osteoporosis. So in 2015, he published a study that showed 12 poses that can be used that have been shown to improve bone quality, bone density. And in this video, we're going to talk about the standing poses from his research. And then in another video, we'll be talking about the poses that are done down on the mat. So in looking at Dr. Fishman's research, a lot of these poses require a lot of mobility from the hip. And if you're first starting out your exercise journey, you may not have the mobility that's required to get into the full measure of Dr. Fishman's poses. And you can still have the same benefits from the adapted versions of these poses that you would get from doing the full measure of the pose. So in this video, I'm going to show the full measure of the pose, and then we're going to talk about how these poses can be adapted. To begin demonstrating Dr. Fishman's 12 poses, let's start with the poses that are done standing up. So let's start with tree pose. Tree pose is a balance pose. So to begin doing tree pose, press firmly into the floor with one foot and then lift your other foot up off of the ground into either a low tree or a high tree, making sure that there's not any pressure on your standing leg knee. So if you look up Dr. Fishman's research and his study, you'll see the full measure of poses. And I'm going to show the full measure of these poses, but then let's talk about how we can adapt them. So to come into this pose, this foot is up close to the groin, and then arms are extended up towards the sky. So this is creating balance to come into tree pose. And it also has, it's putting good weight into the standing leg hip. So you'd want to do one side and then the other side. And by reaching arms up towards the sky, we're also creating extension through the spine. So this is putting good stress on the spine. It's helping to improve postural muscles. It's getting the core working because the core has to work to keep you in balance. And it's loading good weight into the hip. So you'll see adaptations for this pose where you have toes still down on the ground. This is not actually going to contribute or help to building bone because the foot's not off the ground, so you're not really loading the weight into the hip. But when you lift your foot even just a little bit, bringing it up onto the ankle, then you're going to get all of the benefits of doing this pose. I'm just going to switch sides here while I keep talking. But coming into tree pose, it may be that it's easier to hold your balance, to have your arms out to the sides. And also when looking at balance, it's helpful to find a spot to gaze at somewhere in front of you that's not moving. You could also begin by holding onto a chair on one side or using a wall. And some people find that it's also helpful to come into balance by standing off of their mat and pressing into a solid surface with the floor. So I would encourage you to do a tree every day. And the other thing that's really important to consider with Dr. Fishman's research is that all of these poses are held for around 30 seconds. So that's an important thing to consider when looking at bone building. All right, let's move on to the next pose. So the next pose would be side triangle pose. I'm going to actually use the golfer pickup to pick up my block, stepping one foot forward, coming into a bit of a twist and picking up my block. So that's how you can pick something up safely if you happen to have osteoporosis and spare the spine. So to come into side triangle pose, step your feet out to a wide leg stance. I'm going to leave my left foot pointing towards the side of the mat and turn my right toes so that they're facing the end of the mat. I have a line going down the middle of my mat, and you'll notice that the heel of my right foot is in alignment with the middle of my back foot. In some yoga classes, you'll hear that you should keep your hips totally flat and straight, and that can actually wear out the hips eventually if it's done enough. So coming into side triangle pose, when I teach this pose, I always teach it to create a slight angling in the hips. So you'll notice straight and then that slight angling. Just coming in and sinking in just a little bit. So now my left hip has come in and there's a slight angling. You can come in and do this pose with a block, or to bring your hand down to your leg, or if you're doing it Dr. Fishman style, you'll probably see his hand wrapped around his big toe, reaching all the way over. So bringing your arms out to your sides, come over to the side, bringing your hand down to a block, your leg, ankle, or your foot. You could also do this pose with a chair. So one thing to keep in mind with Dr. Fishman's poses is that they require a lot of mobility from the hip. And that's a really good thing that we want to have, because mobility through the hip is something that will help us in our daily life to spare the spine. But until that flexibility is developed, a lot of these poses may need some adapting. We're going to talk about that as we go along too. So coming back to side triangle, hand comes down to the block, top arm sweeps up towards the sky, coming into a big circle. The reason for this is that you want your arm to be in alignment with your shoulder. So oftentimes when I'm teaching a class live and in person, I'll see, you tell somebody to reach their arm up and they reach it way back here like this. And you want your arm to be in alignment with your shoulder. This is creating good stress for the spine, the hips. You're working through so you're working through the back of your leg, you're getting a hamstring stretch, but you're also opening through your side body. So you're creating good stress for your spine and the hips. For side triangle pose. All right, let's talk about the next pose. The next pose is going to be extended side angle. So maintaining our wide stance. This time I'm just going to switch to the other side so we sort of keep things even. Obviously, you'd want to do these poses on both sides. Keep your right toes pointed towards the side of your mat. Left toes are pointed towards the front of the mat. So again, the front heel is lined up with the middle of my back foot. I'm going to bend the left knee, stacking it over the ankle. Hips are open towards the sides. So you may find that it's difficult to come this deep into a pose, and that's okay. It may be that your stance is shorter, that your knee is up higher, and that's totally okay. You want to work from wherever you are. And then the more that you practice, the deeper you'll be able to go into this pose. You'll increase mobility through the hips, and the lower that you go, the more you sink into your hips, the harder your legs have to work. So when looking at coming into extended side angle, you may see this pose with a hand all the way down on the ground and reaching up and over. And that's certainly possible. This is the full measure of the pose. It's also possible to come into this pose by bringing your arm down to your leg and then reaching your arm up towards the sky. We're working to create a long line of energy from the tip of the fingers all the way down to the toes. And then something that's important to keep in mind coming into extended side angle is that you want to bring the ribs from the side that you're leaning down. So I'm leaning on my left side. So in this case, I'd want to bring my left ribs forward just a little bit. It's getting just a little bit of a twist going there, just a little bit harder work for the spine. And this is one of those poses that's really good for your back, hips, everything. So that's extended side angle. All right, let's talk about Warrior 2. So to come into Warrior 2, I'm going to switch back to the other side. I'm coming into this same positioning with my feet. So right heel is lined up with the middle of the back foot. I'm going to stack my right knee over my ankle. Hips are open towards the sides. take your arms out, reaching as far as you can in both directions. Take a moment to roll your shoulders back once. So why the shoulder roll? When you roll your shoulders back once, you're reaching up towards the sky. You just create a little bit better alignment. So as you're here in Warrior Two, really reach your arms out as far as you can. Go down into your hips as low as you possibly can, because the lower you go, the harder your legs are going to work. One of the things that's really important when working to improve bone quality is that we're working hard. That doesn't mean that you can't start from wherever you are. You absolutely can. If you start with a much shorter stance, that's okay. Work from here, build strength here, and then take it a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. Strength has to be built over time, and that's totally part of the process, and it is a-okay. So Warrior Two. And then from here, let's look at Revolved Triangle. So Revolved Triangle is a pose that requires a lot of mobility. You have to really be able to move from the hip to come into the full measure of the pose. I'm going to demonstrate the full measure of this pose, and then before you're like, oh my word, I could never do that, then I'm going to show how to do this pose with a chair and how I can make it very accessible for you. So taking your legs out to the sides, coming into our same legs here, and I'll show this from two sides so you can see what this looks like from the front and from the back, and then I'll get a chair and show how to adapt to this. So to come into the full measure of this pose, heel is lined up at the middle of the back foot, arms come out to the sides. Where we came into side triangle and we came down to one leg with the arm reaching up towards the sky, now we're going to come into a revolved triangle. So the hand that's facing the back side is the hand that we're going to come into the twist with. So go ahead and use this hand and sweep it back, coming into a revolved triangle. So with a revolved triangle, you might choose to have a block here. You might choose to have a block here. You might choose to have your hand on your foot. Now you'll notice that my back is staying straight. To come in and to come into the full measure of this pose, you have to have the ability to bend from the hip and to come into this pose and keep your back straight. So this is a revolved triangle. Again, with options to have a block or a block. And then I'm going to show how to adapt this pose using a chair. That pose is a wonderful way to put good torque on the spine, but it's also important to have it be accessible. And you may not have the mobility to fold like that from the hip. I did say I was going to show what that looked like from both sides. And let me show what that looks like from both sides. So coming into this pose, this is what it would look like from the back. So this is my back hand now, and I'm bringing it down and coming in for the full measure of this pose, reaching up towards the sky. This is a pretty deep twist. And I would also say that with twists, it's really important to make sure that you can always comfortably breathe. When moving into a twist, take it slowly. Don't ever go deeper than you can comfortably breathe. Let's talk about how to adapt revolved triangle. So I've got a chair here, and you can actually do this a couple of different ways. You could use the seat of the chair or even the back of the chair. So I have my side triangle, my warrior legs going, arms come out to the sides, the hand that's in the back. I'm going to take it and sweep it down towards the chair. You can see how this is not as deep a movement bending through the hips, but it still creates the same really good torque for the spine, and it's just a whole lot more accessible. So another way to do this would be to use the back of the chair. Coming into the side or revolved or the warrior legs here. Arms come out to the sides, and this time I'm going to take the back hand and sweep it towards the back of the chair. So you can see how you're still creating the really good torque for the spine, but at the same time, you've done it in a much more accessible way. So these poses, you can adapt them, and you can get the same benefits from these poses, even if you can't come into the full measure of the pose. So those are the standing poses that were part of Dr. Fishman's research. I hope that you have enjoyed this video and that you found this information helpful. In the next video, I'll be sharing the poses that Dr. Fishman does that are down on the mat and how to make those poses accessible through adaptation for you. And I hope that you will join me in that video. Thank you so much.